So George Lucas, he originally, well, I guess long before that, he was a big fan of these Flash Gordon serials from the 30s and the 40s. And he originally wanted to buy the rights to Flash Gordon so he could make a Flash Gordon movie, but he was pretty bummed out when he wasn't able to purchase them. So he decided to make his own science fiction epic. And I guess we're lucky that happened because everybody probably remembers the 1980 Flash Gordon movie. It's a terrible movie, but it's kind of fun to watch anyway. But this presentation was put together by one of our former curators, Eric Gravett, who is a big Star Wars fan. So let's go ahead and start taking a look at some of these weapons. This first one you see here, that is a British Sterling submachine gun. Now that's the primary rifle used by the Stormtroopers you see, and it's everywhere. But that Sterling submachine gun was actually designed as a replacement for the Sten submachine gun. So that's a 9mm fully automatic weapon. And there are reports that this Sterling machine gun was field tested at Arnhem. So it does have World War II origins, but it's not as common as the Sten, you know. All right. So this slide, we see rebel troops from The Empire Strikes Back, and this is when they're in Hoth. One of the primary weapons that these rebel snow troops used was a blaster rifle, and here it's visible in this slide. Now this blaster rifle is based on a German MP-44 or STG-44. So you can see it pictured here with the German soldier in the photograph. It looks like they just dropped the magazine, took the magazine out, added a scope to it, a few little other tchotchkes, and voila, it was a very futuristic weapon. Now, I guess an interesting note from World War II in regards to this weapon is when GIs encountered it, and GIs really didn't encounter this weapon in great numbers until the Ardennes offensive or the Battle of the Bulge. So GIs would refer to this gun as the Buck Rogers gun because it looks so futuristic. Let's see, I think I have a side-by-side comparison in the next slide. Yeah, here you go. So that's one of the STG-44s from our collection on the right. And on the left is what the property masters added to it to make it look like a weapon from the Star Wars universe. Now, from what I understand, the property masters would assemble an actual weapon, and then they would make casts, like resin casts of these rifles to make additional props. Now there's another character from the Star Wars series. It's you know, the junk traders and scavengers on Luke Skywalker's home planet. So that weapon, you can get a pretty good look at that weapon he has in his hands right there. That is another World War II weapon. That is a chopped down infield rifle with a grenade launching cup on the end of it. And what's really strange about this weapon, the actual weapon is really, really long. It's super long. So you can get a look at the one in our collection in the right photo here. So there's a British infield rifle with a grenade launching cup on the end of it. Now the way that grenade launching cup would work is a soldier would take a blank cartridge and put a grenade in that cup there. First he pulled the pin, but the spoon would be held down by the size of the cup. And then the blank would project grenade. So for the Star Wars films, they just chopped that thing down and made it to a manageable size for a Jawa. So the Jawas had some other World War II material on them. Those pouches you see on his bandolier there, and in the right photo, you can get a pretty good look at them. Those are German ammunition pouches. So German soldiers armed with the K98 rifle would carry one set of these pouches on either side of their belt. So if you take a look at this photo here, you can see this German soldier and those K98 ammunition pouches are plainly visible on his belt there. Now, this is probably one of the most famous weapons from the Star Wars films, probably without a doubt. But there you go, there's Han Solo, and there's his blaster pistol. Now, it looks very similar to the German C96 Mauser pistol. It looks so similar because that's what they used as the basis for the weapon. Now that C96 pistol, that's a really old automatic pistol design. So 96 is the year the piece was designed. So that's 1896. And in order to make that thing look a little more futuristic, they just added a flash hider on the end of it and a scope. Now the sand troopers you see in A New Hope right at the beginning, who are the detachment that's sent down to recover the droids. These are just regular stormtroopers that are equipped with desert survival gear. So these sand troopers, they have a lot of World War II weapons, and a lot of them are almost unaltered. So the sand trooper you see in the foreground there, he's carrying a Lewis gun. So a Lewis gun was a light machine gun that was in use since the First World War. And then it sees brief service with, I believe, the Marine Corps in World War II. The sand trooper behind him, he has an MG-34, which is a German light machine gun. It looks a little strange because he has it upside down, but it is indeed an MG-34. So here we have another sand trooper. If you look at the pouch on his shoulder, that is an MP40 magazine pouch. So we go to the next slide to get a better look at it. So there you see it there. And here in this archival photo, there's a German NCO here, armed with a MP40 submachine gun. And it's pretty clear. You can see the pouches on his belt there. Now, German soldiers armed with the MP40 would have two of these 3-cell pouches on their belts. So that MP40 was a submachine gun that was chambered in 9mm, and those magazines held 32 rounds each. Now here we have a Stormtrooper. Now you can get a better look at that MG-34. That looks unaltered to me. It looks like they just added it to the film without putting anything on it. But that's pretty recognizable there. I guess another thing to note, that these property masters and set designers, they were operating on a shoestring budget. So I believe the original Star Wars film that that premiered in 1977 only had a budget of $11 million. And I guess this is also the golden age of the Army surplus store. So a lot of this material, if you wanted cheap camping equipment or, I guess equipment to set dress your sci-fi movie, you hit the Army surplus store, and it was dirt cheap. Another thing George Lucas wanted in his science fiction movie was a universe that looked lived in and used. So everything's heavily weathered, and it wasn't like sci-fi films or conventional sci-fi films of the day where everything was sterile and sleek looking. So the Star Wars universe had this gritty, weathered, lived in look. So there you can see the MG-34 in action in this World War II archival photo here. And then there's an image of our MG-34 in the collection at the National World War II Museum. Now here's a big fan favorite, Boba Fett. So that cool rifle Boba Fett has, turns out it's not even an actual firearm. It is a Webley flare gun. So these property masters just, you can see it doesn't even look like it's been altered that heavily, but they just added a scope to it and put some like a larger thing over the barrel. Now here's Luke Skywalker. You can get a pretty good look at his lightsaber there. I think it's a little clearer in the next photo. There you go. So that lightsaber there, that's probably the iconic weapon of the Star Wars universe. It turns out that piece is nothing more than a flash unit from an old camera. So that's a speed graphic camera. Now the flash unit isn't attached to it in this photo, but it is certainly a flash unit from this camera. And you can see in our collection here in that right photo, that's what the piece looks like unaltered. Now, I did a little reading on these lightsabers, and they just, cobbled cheap materials to these things to make them look futuristic. So the black parts on there, I believe, are windshield wiper blades that have been riveted to the flash unit. Now this guy, he's, you really have to look hard to find this guy in the Star Wars films. He is in the briefing scene in Return of the Jedi aboard that Rebel cruiser. And I can't even begin to pronounce this guy's name, but when I was a kid, I remember the action figure, and he was called Prune Face. So in that left photo, you can see Prune Face's blaster there, and it is an unaltered K98. It doesn't look like there's anything done to it. And on the right side is one of the German K98 Mauser rifles in our collection. And again, we see that archival photo, that German soldier there with his K98 rifle. Now, this archival image is of a Navy talker helmet. So you have two sailors here, one with a traditional M1 steel pot on his head, and then the other sailor with the very large helmet is wearing what's known as a talker helmet. Now that helmet was wide enough to hold headphones, so he could have a little protection while operating a radio. Now, Star Wars, well, the property designers or costume designers got a lot of bang out of their buck for this helmet. So this helmet, this Rebel ground crew guy here, he's wearing one that's completely unaltered. It looks like it's just been painted white. And this is probably, everybody recognizes this. This is the scene on Yavin when they're taken off to go attack the Death Star in A New Hope. And then this is the medal ceremony on Yavin. You can see they're using a lot of these talker helmets. This talker helmet is also the basis for the Rebel Fleet Troopers helmet. So they added a few pieces to it, and voila, they had the helmets for the Rebel Fleet Trooper. Also, the basis for the Imperial Naval Troop helmet. So again, they just added a few pieces to it. I believe the Imperial Naval troops kind of utilized the parts from two helmets. If you see the very, I guess the forehead of the helmet there, you see like these holes in it that kind of look like bowling ball holes. And I think those were kind of kit bashed from a World War II US tanker's helmet. You can see the same holes there. And again, there's your Imperial Naval Fleet Troopers there and our US Mark II helmet from our collection. Now, everybody remembers this scene from Return of the Jedi when Luke Skywalker and Princess Leia have the big speeder bike chase. So that Rebel helmet was made from a U.S. Army Air Force's summer weight flight helmet. And you can see they just put that donut thing in the brim on it, and that's pretty much it. But it's very recognizable, in my opinion. Now, if you look closely at the Rebel fleet troops at the beginning of A New Hope, you can tell they're wearing these German jackboots. Or if they're not German jackboots, they look very similar. And as I was saying, the Army surplus stores would have been filled with this stuff, and especially, they're filming this in England, so a lot of this stuff would have been readily available to the production designers. And then here's that medal ceremony again. Now this is kind of just like a Where's Waldo of World War II equipment, in my opinion. If you just look close, there's all kinds of stuff. Now, some of the things, I don't know for sure, are World War II pieces or modern military uniforms, but they certainly look like it to me. So in this image here, if you look to the right of the image, there's this Rebel guard. And that belt he's wearing is an M36 pistol belt. So that's a standard pistol belt that stays in service with the U.S. military for a very, very long time. And then also the uniform he's wearing, I believe, is a U.S. Marine Corps service uniform. If you look around the neck, that Class A uniform, the Marine Greens, they're an open collared uniform, but it kind of looks like they flipped the lapels up and sewed them under and added this Mandarin collar to it. Could be wrong, but it sure does look a lot like a Marine Corps uniform to me. And there's a better look at that M36 pistol belt I mentioned in the last slide. And there's a pretty good look, this Marine on Okinawa with his M36 pistol belt around his waist. You know, there's no World War II equipment or material in this photograph as far as I can see. But I think it's kind of neat to point out that, you know, this scene in A New Hope when they're in these gunner positions in the Millennium Falcon, they look very much to me like this whole scene was inspired by, you know, the air war in Europe in World War II, where, you know, these heavy bombers that were just bristling with guns and had gunner positions all over them. It looks like this was the, or, you know, the World War II air campaign in Europe was kind of the inspiration for this scene. There's Han Solo there. Especially when you kind of take a look at the ball turret position aboard B-17s. Now, I guess the ball turret is probably the most like those positions on the Millennium Falcon. The airman is completely contained inside the turret, and he's actually using a series of foot pedals and levers to operate that turret. And again, no World War II material in this photograph. But there's a propaganda poster from the World War II era. Now, the helmet depicted in that propaganda poster is actually a World War I style German helmet. The bolts on the side of it kind of give that away. Now, those bolts were designed for what was called a gunner's plate. So it was a big, thick, heavy piece of steel that would hang over those bolts, and it would give machine gunners who were kind of constantly exposed a little more protection. But you can see there's a lot of similarities here between, you know, the silhouette of that German Stahlhelm helmet and Darth Vader's silhouette there. But I think there's a lot of similarities between World War II and Star Wars. It looks like the entire empire is based on, you know, the Third Reich Germany, in my opinion. All right. So I figured we'd have a lot of questions, so it'd be fun to kind of open this up to discussion right now. So if anybody has any questions, we can certainly discuss it. Okay, so Megan wants to know, May already answered this, and I just missed it, but did Lucas give much thought to what countries' weapons would be used for each character, such as German weapons for stormtroopers and Allied weapons for the resistance? I think they kind of went with these German weapons because they were more futuristic. And as I mentioned, a lot of this filming occurred in Europe or North Africa, and I guess these foreign weapons would have been what was more prevalent in those areas. And also another thing, these German weapons, they would look foreign to American audiences. So I think you know, with those considerations, that's why they chose those weapons. All right, what material is the Rebel helmet made up of? Okay, well, the Rebel helmet that's used in films, I would imagine it was some type of fiberglass or ABS plastic that was added to it. But the original Talker helmet, it's made of manganese steel. Okay. So, and then I have another question here. Did your research show that Lucas did indeed use World War II for inspiration? I think it's kind of it's kind of undeniable. You know, you see so many similarities between the Imperial officer's uniform. I think you know, having something patterned after Third Reich Germany, it's kind of like a natural, or like the ultimate villain. All right. So here's another question from Rob. Flight controls of X-Wing and TIE Fighter, any resemblance to World War II fighters? I would say the controls resemble, you know, most aircraft, either a control yoke or a like the joystick configuration. So I would say that those are pretty similar to real world aircraft. All right. And then David has a question here. Do you think samurai swords played a role in lightsaber concept? I definitely believe you know, samurai culture was a big influence on Star Wars. I know George Lucas was a big fan of Japanese cinema, and that certainly came into play. All right, so there's another question here. Did you ask any Star Wars folks if the inspiration for the space gun scenes were from World War II air battles? Yeah, for sure. I think a lot of those aerial combat scenes were kind of originally scripted from you know, archival footage of actual air battles. I know the film The Dam Busters looks very similar to the dogfight over the Death Star. And the Millennium Falcon escape scene, where the TIE fighters attack them and they're in those gunner positions, that almost is almost a shot-for-shot copy of a 1943 movie called Air Force. Those scenes look very, very similar when you put them side by side. Okay. Here's a interesting question here. Were any of the location scenes based off of World War II locations and battles? I think a lot of the battles you see, like in Empire Strikes Back, where they're fighting on Hoth, there's a trench network dug, That's very reminiscent of World War I, in my opinion. And then the snow speeders with the pilot and then the gunner, the rear-facing gunner, kind of reminded me of World War II dive bombers. So I think a lot of these battles and scenes are draw on World War I, World War II for inspiration. Okay, here's another good question. This may be more World War I oriented, but do you think there is any intended correlation or inspiration between Imperial stormtroops and German stormtrooping? I think, yeah, for sure. Now, the German stormtroops are, that's a World War I term where they outfitted these units with MP-18s, which was the first practical submachine gun design in the world, and these units infiltrated enemy trenches. So yeah, I think that's definitely intentional. All right, here's another question. Is it true that the Clone Blaster DC-15 is based on a German machine gun? Now, I don't think I've seen the prequels enough to make that determination. I know with the sequels and the prequels, I think most of those were designs from the ground up that kind of resemble the items from the original trilogy, but I think those are all, I don't think they're drawing any actual World War II equipment, you know. Let's see. All right, so Bridget asks, what is your favorite Star Wars character? Well, I guess it'd have to be Han Solo for sure. Yeah, I think he's one of the cooler characters. Here's another good question. Do you believe the Rebel fighter pilots' flight suits are based off of World War II flight suits? Yeah, there's definitely some elements from the Rebel pilots that are definitely World War II based. The little the bandolier around the leg with the flares in it, and German fighter pilots usually wore those in World War II. And it's not just from World War II. This equipment is being used in, or just World War II equipment used by these property designers, but a lot of post-war military surplus was used. All right. So I guess that's about all I had today. I hope you enjoyed it, and I guess we'll see you again next time.